Hey boxing fans, this is Ian Thomas and this is Matthias on Boxing. Please hit like and subscribe. This week's fight features Canelo Alvarez versus Avni Yildirim for the Ring WBC WBA Super Middleweight titles at the Hard Rock Stadium in Miami, Florida, and will be shown live on DAZN. Firstly, let's give you a little bit of tail of the tape of both fighters, starting with Canelo Alvarez. He comes into this fight at the age of 30 with a 70.5-inch reach at 5'8" and has a record of 54 wins, 1 loss and 2 draws. And the challenger, Avni Yildirim, comes in here slightly younger at 29 with a 70-inch reach, the slightly taller man at 5'11" and has a fighting record of 21 wins and 2 losses, no draws. Canelo's last fight saw him beat Callum Smith in a wide points victory in December 2020, when Yildirim's last fight was a technical decision loss to Anthony Dirrell, as Dirrell was cut due to an accidental headbutt in the 10th round. This was back in February 2019, so inactivity could play a major part in this fight. Whilst Canelo hasn't been the most active fighter due to the pandemic, I feel the 12 rounds against Callum Smith would hold him in good stead going into this fight. Now let's talk a little bit about the fighters. First, the challenger. Avni Yildirim is a Turkish fighter who likes to come forward but seems to be troubled versus technically better or faster fighters. But you can't knock his overall toughness coming forward, trying to land jabs to the body and throwing big hooks when he's up close to his opponent. But the big question is whether he can close the gap to Canelo. His fight experience is pretty limited compared to Canelo, with a unanimous points win versus veteran Glenn Johnson in 2015, but since have suffered 2 losses to Chris Eubank Jr. and Anthony Dirrell, which has somewhat put a speed bump in the road, showing that Yildirim can be troubled versus faster fighters. For me, Yildirim needs to keep this long, moving in and out, and hope he's got the power to affect Canelo, which is something that everyone has struggled to do so far. Now let's talk about the champion, Canelo Alvarez. He's a Mexican fighter with a counter-punching style, but also at times I've seen him like to come forward in typical Mexican fashion, but that seems to be against opponents that he doesn't seem to be bothered or worried what's coming back in his direction. Canelo is by far the experienced fighter, despite only being a year older than his opponent, and got, just to name a few, mega fights under his belt: Floyd Mayweather, Triple G, Miguel Cotto and Sergey Kovalev. Canelo has fought up and down weights during this time, but in my opinion has looked far better fighter since his loss to Mayweather. His all-round game and durability, I feel, will give Yildirim a very tough night on Saturday. So now for my prediction. For me, I can only see Canelo winning, but whether it's a decision or a knockout depends whether or not Yildirim, in my opinion, can take the power of Alvarez early. Again, for me, I can see Canelo knocking Yildirim out in the middle rounds. This is based on Yildirim's lack of big fight experience and his 3rd round knockout defeat to Chris Eubank Jr. in the World Super Series tournament. Canelo sometimes in the early rounds sees what his opponent brings and then adapts his fighting style and sees whether or not he can land the heavy shots. As I mentioned earlier, Yildirim's inactivity since 2019 will be a major factor in this fight, and I don't see this going the distance. In my opinion, Canelo wins by knockout. But again, Yildirim is going to come forward, he is going to try and land bombs, but whether or not he can land one on Canelo remains to be seen. Hope you enjoy the fight on Saturday. And this is Matthias on Boxing.